So today we're going to get an overview of replacing the parts that go to the control lever, which is this in the parts diagram. You've got your linkage, that's a jam nut there, and then your inline joint. The inline joint quite often does get replaced and obviously screws into the control valve. But what happens is in the control lever, that hole gets worn out and the linkage actually gets worn smaller and you get play there. Then also there's this washer that is for the control rod to pivot in, and that gets worn out as well. The washer actually sits in a piece called the steering support. This is the steering support. There's two bolts, goes through the frame on both sides. Here's the overall view of the steering support with all the steering pieces in this part. But the steering or the control lever bushing sits in a little fits right down inside there, and then you see there's a notch. Well, that control lever, when you pry the spring up, comes straight forward from the notch. On a 3-digit tractor, that cannot occur with the PTO lever in the way, because the PTO lever comes across this way inside the tower, and when you try to kick the control lever forward, it would hit the PTO lever, so you have to move the PTO lever. But a 4-digit tractor doesn't have that PTO rod, so you're fine on that. So that's where this washer that comes with the kit sits down in there, and then the control lever sits in the hole, and that takes out a lot of your slop when you replace that. And there's the bigger picture of it, so that sits right in there. And then this is the blow up of the control valve. A typical control valve, doesn't matter actually what version it is or anything. But what's happening in the control valve is this is your spool, and when there's slop, what happens is when you go into the notched areas to allow flow, the lever, control lever and linkage starts pushing it into the flow of the pressure of the hydraulic pump, which is 2,200 pounds approximately. And the reason your tractor jumps is because you enter the area of pressure with the control lever, but then the pressure of the system all of a sudden pushes the spool, so it goes really fast from barely moving to half speed because of all the slop. That is why the tractor jumps, because of the control linkage. So with the control linkage slop, you push it in there a little bit, and then the pressure pushes the spool itself really fast. So you literally go from like barely moving, like say 1 mile per hour to 2-3 miles per hour in an instant, because of the pressure that's in the system. So that's why you got to take out all the slop. My newest linkage is this linkage. Replacing, this is what you find on most tractors, and there are a few oddballs that have this version, where this was screwed into the control valve. This one you only see once in a great while on 4-digit tractors, so we won't really worry about it. This is the one that you see the most often, and in this ball socket here, it gets play in it, and then that's where you get a Jumpy tractor. And then the other place is this gets worn where my thumb is here, this gets worn and the hole gets big. So my solution with this kit, I'm getting rid of that tiny, look how small this ball is. Ball and socket is only that big compared to the large ball I've got here with a 5/16 pin, and there's zero slop. Even brand new, this has to have a little bit of play or else it doesn't move very well. So this has absolutely zero slop. And as you can see, 5/16 pin with a ball that will never wear under this circumstance. So this is like a 1,000 mile joint. This is like a lot of miles, 100,000 mile joint. And then I replaced the end of the lever with a actual joint. This joint in this application will last forever. And you put that right in the hole. Now, I started out my first version, I could find this in a 5/16 system, and the hole was 1/4, so you had to drill out your control lever to 5/16. Well, now you don't. This is a 1/4 inch joint. It'll bolt right in the hole. So this new right angle bolts right into that hole. In this picture here, the bend is coming from the bottom of the hole. There are versions that come from the top go down. So put it back the way it was. And if you can't remember, well, if you only take the one side off, copy what the PTO side is. This is the PTO side here. So they can come up from the bottom or down from the top. To tighten this linkage, you can obviously tighten the nut if you can get to it, or you can tighten the stud. They call that the stud, where my thumbs are turning. With my type of nut I put on here, the nice thing is once you get this to finger tight, you can generally just turn the stud and this will tighten up by itself. If you get this nut tight enough, it kind of stays put. And I've actually, all the installs I've done, I've never had to put a wrench on both, except for maybe one time, I think. It may happen, but it's tricky to get your hands into that area. It's crowded, so you may have to remove some items to get out of the way. The item that I remove the most is the pump pressure line. You have to get that out of the way to get into it. And to replace this washer, to tell you the truth, the easiest way to do it is with the engine at least scooted forward. And ideally the hydraulic tank out. So that's your overview.